the street crazy. Let's be real clear. Let's be real
glad
clear.
You clarified that.
Okay.
The next thing I was going to say is,
I knew that's where you were going to go. That's why I said, let's just deal with that part, because I know that's where you're going. Right?
Where I struggle is living in the now while keeping my vision for the future at. Because I'm very aware of the body that I walk in this world with.
I'll tell you.
Been in this body for 40 plus years and have seen some common patterns in the sorts of folks that have expectations about me and for my life. So I would be a fool to be dismissive of those patterns. And I also feel a particular responsibility as a parent, as a Black woman parent who is raising a young Black girl, to socialize her to be aware of those patterns as well.
I'll tell you, as a 200-pound Black man who
we don't do weight. We don't
walks with a big coat.
We don't do
you
weight.
know what I'm saying?
We don't body shame.
Who goes to the gym early in the morning, 5:00 in the morning, and it's cold, so I'm doing a real brisk walk. You know what I mean? Plus, I'm trying to get my Google Fit steps in there. I see the way people look crossing streets, and again, I'm not going to play the game of white people, that people. It's people. And I get it. I feel you. I just can't allow it to be a part of my world. So if you feel, oh, this brother is coming up on me because he wants to steal something, because you believe that I got out of my bed at 4:30 in the morning, not to go to the gym, but to randomly select you to steal from you, then you are well within your right to cross that street. And the reason why I'm not going to take and dismiss that mentality, because a man was attacked at 2:00 in the morning getting a Subway sandwich, right? So that's why I'm saying I have my mentality in which I choose to see and actively work to see the good in other people. But I never delude myself into thinking that when people see me as a Black man walking down the street, that they don't see me as the rapist, the murderer, the person who's going to assault them, the person who's trying to rob them. I get it, but that's your world. I'm not going to live in that world with you.
Can you talk to us some more about how you manage that tension? I'm trying to envision what that would be like for me to do that. I don't know how to sit in that space.
Well, it's a lot of Tito's handmade vodka. And no, I'm playing.
You're not actually in that space.
Maybe I'm in altered states. Maybe I'm in altered states. No, it's work. It's work every single day. But the one thing I do is acknowledge my own humanity. And I think that's important. And here's what I mean by that. If I see someone doing that and I get angry, I feel that anger. I don't deny that anger because I believe that I'm entitled to that anger. I deserve that anger. I know how I deserve to be treated. I know who I am. And if someone is just looking and saying, well, this is how this person presents, so I'm going to judge him based on that, it does make me angry. As much as I understand why they may feel that way, it still makes me angry, and I still own that anger. But the question is, what do I do with that anger? What I don't do with that anger is say, well, if people think I'm like this anyway, I'm going to become this person. What I don't do with that anger is microaggress in my relationships and come home and lay hands on my partner and all the other things that people do, or drink excessively, go out, do this, that. I don't do that stuff. What I choose to do with that anger is to turn it into things like the podcast that I was telling you about, stories, in which some of those very same things are things that I address. I turn it into plays. I turn it into works of art because I believe that my experience is not solitary. I believe that there are a lot of people who feel this way, and I don't think there's a lot of work out there that addresses this. I don't think that I'm that anomalous. I just think that a lot of people align themselves with a certain polarized mentality because it's easier to do so. It's easier for me to look at someone and say, that B word, she just looking at me like F her, than to acknowledge that we live in a world where there's a narrative that says I am a threat to her. I also turn it into a joke when I'm walking down the street and I see a person grab their purse and put it to the other side. And I say to myself, you're afraid I'm going to steal your purse. Meanwhile, I'm having this thought in English. So everything has already been stolen from me. That's how I deal with it. But as you know, because you know me, it's a very thoughtful, very complicated way that I look at this and look at the nuances surrounding it. I don't like the broad strokes. I don't think they're fair. They aren't fair to me.
No, and I agree with that. I do. I also, I think there's a lot more similarity in our worldviews than not. But I also, after teaching diversity and social justice for 20 some years, I also recognize that people are coming to this conversation at different levels of understanding and thoughtfulness about this. Yeah. And my ear is out for how things might be misinterpreted for folks who haven't been engaged in the work and thinking about it as long as you and I have. Right. So that's why I'm trying to round out the conversation. And
acknowledging that in order to do that work in the greater world, you have to do that work for yourself. You can't come into that space doing the work without dealing with your own implicit bias, which people do things without realizing thus the definition of implicit bias. You have to deal with your own stuff first and be honest with your own stuff first before you move into that space. Yeah.
So in thinking about listening to you talk this last passage, I immediately thought of one of my sheroes, Miss Audre Lorde. And she...
I'm sorry, I got to do it. Yes, God, Miss Audre Lorde.
God.
Yes.
She has said, I've said...
Oh, she is everything.
She has said all the things about all the things.
And all the things about all the things. Yes.
So
oh, my goodness. Yes. Woo, that brought immediate joy in my soul. Yes,
I come back to her work over and over and over and over again. And so in 1981, she gave a speech entitled The Uses of Anger, Women Responding to Racism. I encourage you to read the whole speech, but I just want to read a couple excerpts. She starts by saying, racism, the belief in the inherent superiority of one race over all others, and thereby the right to dominance, manifest and implied. She said, women respond to racism. My response to racism is anger. I have lived with that anger, ignoring it, feeding upon it, learning to use it before it laid my visions to waste for most of my life. Once I did it in silence, afraid of the weight. My fear of anger taught me nothing. Your fear of that anger will teach you nothing also. She goes on and on and on. And then towards the end of the speech, when she starts to bring it home, this is the part that I want us to really focus on. She says, but anger expressed and translated into action in the service of our vision and our future is a liberating and strengthening act of clarification. For it is in the painful process of this transition that we identify who are our allies, with whom we have grave differences, and who are our genuine enemies. That to me is a reflection of what you're saying. Like, we all have to come to understanding, what I often come back to, even in my deep belief in the pursuit of racial justice and equity. The older I get, the more I also come to realize the concurrent need for class equity and how much race and class are tied together. But that I think the piece that has the capacity to pull us back before the tipping point is this focus on class and individual rights to actually have access to freedom to pursue happiness. I think that's why white folks got to be so threatened by MLK, because towards the end of his life, he wasn't just talking about racial justice. He started talking about war profiteering. He started talking about us not getting into not investing in military efforts. And he started talking about workers' rights and unionization and people being able to take care of themselves and have enough food for their family. Those ideals are unifying ideals that transcend race in a lot of ways. I think that's where the real threat lies in for folks, that if we can get past these other pieces, these other very real obstacles and very real negative consequences of racial injustice, of homophobia and heterosexism, of sexism that is still deeply entrenched, of transphobia. If we can move past that and focus on all the other ways that we have allies for whom we are gravely different, but we're allied in more ways than we are enemies, I think that is what needs to happen to prevent the tipping point. Now, do I have the mechanisms? Do I have the solution for how to get us there? Am I going to always be willing to cross the aisle, so to speak, and have that conversation? Nope, I don't. When I hear things like what happened to Jussie Smollett, I immediately run into my racial feelings about it. I immediately run into my LGBTQ ally community feelings about it. And it does become about those very pointed things, even though I recognize that those things exist in a broader context. So I want us to work towards doing both and, because I think that is where the real undoing happens, is when we are able to attend to both and at the same time.
And I think it's important to acknowledge just that, to acknowledge your humanity, acknowledge that it was very personal for you. I mean, it was personal for me as well. I'm just very particular in what I choose to put out into the universe, because there's so much negativity out there. I'm just not interested in being a part of that negativity. I also tend to do a lot of sitting back and watching. And when you sit back and watch people, what you'll find is patterns that are similar across various different classes and races and genders. And so I sit back and say, you all know you're all saying the same thing. You're just not talking to each other. You're talking at each other. And you're so invested in the other person being wrong that you don't actually hear what the other person is saying. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, we as a country have had argument upon argument upon argument about people getting health care. Why is this a conversation? We claim to be the greatest nation in the world, yet we also claim that if you cannot afford health care, you do not deserve health care. But the narrative is, it's not that I don't want health care. It's that I don't want to pay for other people's contraception. I don't want to pay for other people's abortion. Stop. Stop. Because let's be honest, nobody is out there using contraception like that. I mean, let's just be real honest for a second.
We're gonna take a break and we'll be back.
Instead of texting your loved ones, send them a personalized video with your favorite photos and songs, blended by Miss Rose at www.memories.tech. Miss Rose will blend any song for lovers, children, teens, and all. Many blends are already in place. Take a look and see at www.memories.tech. These blends keep memories alive. See what magic Miss Rose can create for your special someone at www.memories.tech.
So hopefully you were able to listen to our pre-podcast of the hashtag Justice for Jussie podcast, and you were able to listen to the hashtag Justice for Jussie podcast. Sorry. If you didn't, this whole next part will make zero sense to you. So the pieces kind of all go together.
True facts.
And so I think the note that we ended on that I kind of want to sharpen up a little bit more, because I do think that this is where the conversation needs to go. And we talked about, who do you believe, right? Who do you believe and who do you get outraged for? As always, these are personal opinions, right? And a lot of let me say it this way. At any point, one's personal opinion about something or reaction to is a amalgamation of their worldviews that they have been socialized to believe, their personal experiences, and a reflection of the kind of capacity, I think, for critical reflection and critical thought. And what I think happens oftentimes, especially in situations as incendiary and provocative as this one, is that we fall back a bit more on our socialization and some of our unchallenged thoughts, and not always think through our personal experiences and or critical thinking about this. And I'm not saying that in a way to
reinforce these trenches of somebody who's, which perspective is right or wrong, who you should believe or who not, but just to